So this is the 13th Nordic Harp meeting. As you all know, we were a little bit unlucky. We should have been meeting everybody in Albertslund in Denmark, but due to COVID, we couldn't do this. So we had a little talk, Erik and Josef and me, and decided that you can't postpone the 13th meeting. That's a no-go. You have to do.
It's like double bad luck if you have it twice.
Exactly. So we decided to move the 13th online and take the 14th in Denmark. So I hope to see all of you in Denmark in a little less than 1 year in October. But you will hopefully get the dates in next week. But I suppose we should just go on with it. So welcome to Chris. Thank you so much to Anouk for hosting this. And later we will thank Vincent for the same, because it's so brilliant. They're taking hours from their schedule just to host these Zoom meetings. And also a huge thank you to Erik, who has done an amazing job of coordinating all the live videos that's going to be shown on Facebook. And also, of course, to everybody who's making a contribution to this, because nobody's getting a penny for it. It's all a great show of I mean, this amazing energy, this big heart of Nordic Harp meeting. So yeah, I'm so proud to be a part of this team. And let's move on to Chris and Bára.
We were kind of puzzled about quite what we could do as a Zoom or Facebook stream type thing. And so I suggested that maybe we talk about this organization that we and Rosa, who's with us here today, are involved with. And it's actually a very interesting organization, I think, as a foreigner in Iceland. So we can tell you a bit about the story of Kvæðamannafélagið Iðunn and what it's been doing over the years. That's the Iðunn logo you can see there. The society was founded in 1929, so we had the 90th anniversary last year. It was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday the 15th of September, and the people who founded the organization were men and women moving into Reykjavik from the rural areas. There was quite a big move at the time into Reykjavik from the countryside, but the population was very small, and so even with this influx, Reykjavik only had 28,000 people living in it at the time, and so very small populations we're talking about.
Many of these people came from a county in the north called Húnavatnssýsla, and that's actually where I come from also.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So here's a family group of one of this family were key founder members, and they were all involved. I think, I'm not sure if Margaret was involved, but the rest were. And they were, like a lot of the people involved in getting the thing going, they were people who brought their singing traditions with them. So they were these were people who had been used to performing for each other back in the countryside, and when they moved to Reykjavik, they wanted to be able to carry on doing it. And so that was a big motivation in starting off the society. And it's, as we saw earlier, it's called Kvæðamannafélagið Iðunn. Iðunn is the Nordic god of poetry, you know. So yes, here's a couple of audio files. Is Þuríður?
Hugan segða svalli frá, sundin heiði og skörðin vonar leið valið þá, vestur breiða fjörðin. Allt borið burtu gróm, bæði að skor og
so that's Thurider, and then this is her brother, Björn.
Flaskan þjála léttir lund lætir tálið dvína vénar jála vænastum vemir sálu mína. Flaskan svarta það fylltakinn skatti fínu gleði bjarta kyrslógir gefur hjarta mínu. Flaskan meðan fellir tár fippast elli takið 50 og 5 þó ár felist mér að baki. Þegar sál næðisnum naktir dýra vega þá undir glasaglaum guðdómlegt að teiga.
This was a drinking song, and he was talking, as you can see, flaskan, the bottle. It's wonderful to swallow the drinks from the bottle.
So we'll be doing some of that this evening, apparently, or at least we're virtually doing it this evening. Now we move on to another sister. So this is Sigurður. You'll notice that all three of these people were also very involved with other, they were activists basically, and they were involved with all sorts of other activisms outside of the music. You can hear straight away from these samples, and this one now we're going to play you as well. We're talking about a singing tradition which is a cappella and solo. That's what they did.
Lækir flæða hækkar heim, huljum kvæði skap mitt índa. Engin mæði amar heim, æsku bræðu mínir sínda. Álglöð skjálfa æslið þar, yngi sjálfur væri heim. Alla hálfar hendingar, hoppa álfar fram á veginn. Vængir blaka hefjast hátt, heiði taka þrárnar seiða. Sólheit vakir sunnan átt, svanir kvaka fram til heiða. Lánafjöll og birtir nótt, brak og sköllum heiðalendur. Vatnaföllin vaksa og vetur öllum fæti stendur.
You can hear a lot of these melodies, they have quite a narrow compass. They maybe sometimes only cover a range of 3 or 4 tones, but depending on the singer, they can be quite, as you heard, quite highly decorated. Okay, so we were saying earlier, a lot of these people were other activists in other areas. So the first chairperson of Iðunn was a man called Kjartan Ólafsson, and he was coming from the south of the country, unlike the others who came from the north. But he was a founder member of a trades union, and these are people who were working in manual trades. They were working class people, so they were working as laundry workers, as builders, plasterers, carpenters, whatever. So it's definitely not the thing that was happening, say, in the UK, where organizations were being set up at that time, which were basically coming from middle class, even university educated people. These were working people who were doing this. Here's another another example of one of the early members.
Meðan aðrir una sér í viði stoflaun mín. Mitt orðið gaman, eina stöka fella saman. Ég á rafla hljómbrotum á hugan strengjum, sem ég reynaði tólka á tungu, til að létta skapið þungu. Margt þar í muna gemta mörgu tagi, minningar úr heimahögum, hvarflaðari frá liðnum dögum. Mörg ein vonin var á hlý og vöku dreymin, út í lífsins gitla geima, gama varð á ofta sveima.
He was singing from a letter, like a poetic letter. That's what some people did to could write poems. They, instead of just writing letter like we do, you know, they put it in a,
Or even an email.
they put it in a kind of poetic form, so you could sing it also.
So they founded the organization in 1929, and they had sort of 3 working sections or subcommittees in there. It was very organized. It was
Actually more.
yeah, it was like it was kind of organized along the same sort of lines as a trades union might be. So they were very clear about having a committee and subcommittees, and all the meetings were minuted, and there's an incredible record of stuff in the meeting minutes going back over a period of 90 years. And so they had the subcommittee that was particularly involved with the words, and the subcommittee that was particularly involved with the music. And then they also had the travel section, and they used to go on trips around and camping trips. I mean, Bára went on camping trips when she was little. So we thought it would be worth just giving a few sort of background definitions to this material that they were working with, their thing. You'll see as we go on, there's this kind of these 2 facets. There's the words and there's the music. So starting with the words, the form is the kind of form of poetry that was used in Reamer, which was these really long, epic, multi-chapter narrative, for the want of a better word, ballads. And I mean, when I say long, they were really long. Like, we think in English tradition, like 100 verses is pretty long, but these could be up to 10 times that long, and divided into chapters and so on. The words were written down. I mean, it's hard to remember 1,000 verses, but the tunes were transmitted orally, and there was no music notation of the tunes. And this is a very long tradition. The earliest known written down Reamer is from 1390, so 600 years ago. And it carried on through the centuries, and in the 18th and 19th centuries, it was really kind of a flourishing thing. And these poems, the Reamer, they were always sung. And then later on, like in the 19th and going into the 20th century, people would write other things using the same poetic meters and rhyming schemes and so on. So like Bára just said with the last thing, you had something written in a letter written in this form. So, you know, you wouldn't have a 1,000-verse letter. You have like maybe 5 or 6 stanzas, say. And so and the short ones are often called kvæðalög, or referred to as kvæðalög, and it comes from the word kvæði, poem. And so this word with the kvæði word gets woven into other parts, you see. So we come to the music. So lag is the Icelandic word for a tune or a melody. And then there are 3 words that are used. They all mean the tunes that are used for these kinds of things. Did you want to say something, Bára?
Yeah, that's basically what we use. The words we use is rimnalag, kvæðalag, or stemma. That basically mean tune to sing for these little verses. And we call it, this type of singing, we call it að kveða. And yeah, so basically that's að kveða is the style of singing, this kind of poems, which are written in the style, the same meters as Reamer.
Yeah, and very often people translate að kveða, they translate it as chanting, to chant, and we don't agree with that definition really, but I think I was talking to somebody from Norway, and where they have apparently the kveða as well, and I said, well, what do you mean by kveða? And she said, well, singing in a folk style. And I think that's more like what it means to me when I listen to it. Okay, so this is the really interesting bit about all this stuff. We've been talking about the poetry and the tune separately, and they are kind of separate. So the Reamer texts are not written with a specific melody in mind, but they're written to very specific and particular rules about meter and rhyming schemes and so on. And by the same token, the tunes that people are using are not written for a particular poem. They're written to a particular scheme, a poetic meter scheme. And so that means that you can mix and match how you want. You can take a tune here and put it with this words here. And as long as you stick within the thing about, you know, we've got a tune that fits a particular meter, then we can sing any poem written in that meter with that tune. And people did. And then if you had a tune that you particularly liked and it wasn't quite the right meter, then you could bend it to fit as well. And the choice was up to the performer, and a performer might sing the same words to a different tune on different days. Okay.
Yep.
So we could maybe just show you some examples of these meters. I think we've done this at Nordic Harp meetings before, but there'll be some people here today who haven't seen this before. So the most common meter is this first one, and the little numbers down the side and the boxes refer to the number of syllables in a line. So you've got 7 syllables or beats in the first line, 6 in the second, 7 in the third, and 6 in the last one. And often the melodies stretch across 2 of those lines, so you get 13 beats. And so there's a lot of tunes which have a 13 beat cycle. They go 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 and so on. So do you want to just, well, we heard her say the Svatli Frau that was being sung just now. So
yeah, that's Ferskella.
That's Ferskella.
Hugan seiðar svalli frá, sundin heið og skörðin, vona leið valin þá, vestur breiða fjörðin. So this text is basically about there were people traveling together to west part of Iceland called Breiðafjörður, and the next one, ferskeytla ringkent. Ringkent means that it's a rhyme in the middle. You see the yellow boxes. So it's gleð, seð, skeð, or kveð. So it's also a rhyme, not only in the end, but also in the middle there. So we call it ringkent. Höldum gleði hátt á loft, helst það seður gaman. Þetta skeður ekki oft, að við kveðum saman. And often they were stretching when they were singing this kind of verses, that they were stretching for the rhyme in the middle.
Yeah. And of course, because these are both ferskeytla, you can see the syllables are still the same. So we could sing Hugan Seida to Höldum Gleði, and we could also sing it the other way around.
Höldum gleði hátt á loft, helst það seður gaman, þetta skeður ekki oft, að við kveðum saman.
That's a different one.
Yeah, these have more syllables, so longer lines. Langkenda. My father he wrote this verse, and he used to sing this tune to it. Sumri hallar svanir gjalla, sölnar fjalla drottning blá. Heiðin kallar ykkur alla, innstu fjalla timdað sjá.
And so you can see we've had 3 different versions of a 4-line verse, but you could have 3 lines or even 2, but here's a 3-line one.
Man ég bjarta bæinn minn frá bernsku dögum, þar sem rjári söng af sögum, sónar galdri rímna lögum.
Yes.
So the first line was longer, and the second and the third line, they had the same amounts of syllables.
Yeah, I just noticed that the L in rímna lögum is bread, so there's 2 instead of 1. Okay, so now we come to this really important feature of this work. We talked earlier about the tunes that people were using were transmitted orally and not written down. And so they devised a scheme for being able to tell people what tune they wanted to use by linking the tune to a particular verse. So they would be able to, so you get the idea. You can say, oh, well, we're going to sing this to the tune that we always use for blah, 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 whatever. And it was a really good sort of reference system, but it didn't mean that you always had to use that tune. It wasn't locked in like a written song, but it was a way of passing on verbally information about the tune to be used.
And remember,
yeah. And then one of the things that the Ilan members did when they founded the society is they kind of worked up a quite sophisticated version of this idea of the lagbola system. So they had the tunes linked to specific lines of verses and so on, and they also numbered it. So there's like number 1, number 2, number 3, like hymns in a hymn book. And so, for instance, the one we heard earlier, Like Your Flyther, that's number 136, and everybody knows that kind of thing. And here's an example of how this system can work. So Kjartan, the original foremother chairperson, he's recorded singing number 44, which is linked into the verse Rængi sólur ykkur dimm, and that sounds like this.
Rængi sólur ykkur dimm, reynslu skóla ganga, við mig ólu örlög grimm, undir njólu vanga.
Then if we go to this one, this is number 123, and Siri, who we heard earlier, she sings number 123.
Yeah, but this lagbóði sé ég gróa grænka kvist.
Yeah.
That's the first line of the verse.
Yeah. So, where's the mouse gone? There we go. So she's singing this melody.
Ég gró og grænka kvist í grynni snjóa tati vonið hró herja fyrst hlýja lóðu taki.
There's a little story here. We have, we wanted to perform the verses or the text which Kjartan was singing, the whole poem. And
it's a kind of blues text.
Sad love song blues type text. And we thought his, you know, his tune was a bit kind of bouncy for that. It's like, you know, oh, my dear, my girlfriend's dead, da 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 da, da sort of thing. And so Bára thought that Siri's tune was more appropriate for the meaning of the words. So then when we did those words, we used her tune. And we put some instruments in as well.
Sólur rökkur þeim, reyn
could actually build something quite relatively big out of these very, very simple melodies and as a starting point. Oops, there we go. So we mentioned this loud baller idea, the numbered songs, and the other members really got stuck in with this, and they decided that the best way to make sure these tunes got remembered and recorded was to record them orally onto discs. So they set up a project and they decided to record 200 of these melodies with their signature verses. And they got together, it must have been a substantial amount of money at the time, and they went into a studio here in Reykjavik, downtown, and 12 adults and a 9-year-old's boy as well. They recorded these 200 tracks over a period of 2 years, and when it was finished, the whole set of recordings covered 50 discs, and silver lacquer discs, which was like state of the art at the time. And then subsequently those discs and the documentation that they prepared around them, that went to the National Museum. Oops, I don't want to do that. So now we come to a bit closer to home. And Bára's family have been involved in this kind of musical activity for generations. Her paternal grandparents, Lárus and Péturina, lived on the farm Grímstunga up in the north of Iceland, in Húnavatn County, and they both were singers, and Péturina also was a good poet. And then when Bára was little, her parents were living in the farm as well, and her father and mother were both good singers. And then they moved to Reykjavik when Bára was 4 years old, and then subsequently they joined Iðunn because that's where they could do this stuff. And so that meant that basically Bára was brought up in as an Iðunn kid right through. And we just thought we'd like to play just this little.
This is my grandmother.
This is Bára's grandma singing, and I'm just going to fast forward because there's some chat at the beginning of the recording.
He's telling them off. Stiltir.
Konan blessuð kemst á stjá, kærleik meður fínum grautar diskum gengur frá, gætir að hjúum sínum, gætir að hjúum sínum.
Viltu ekki segja mér aftur hver hafði þessa stemmu?
Iðunn was carrying on, and they used to have their kvæðaæðing, as it's called, the practice singing sessions. They used to be held in Bára's family home.
For many years.
And they used to pass the tunes around, recorded on cassettes. And so Bára has memories of when she was young, her mum endlessly copying cassettes to give to people to pass the tunes around. And then around about 1979 was the 50th anniversary of the organization, and they made a vinyl album with 100 tunes. So you can sort of think about how much time you've got on a vinyl album, and you know these tunes are going to be really short. So basically they recorded one verse only of 100 different pieces. And so this is one that, and Bára's dad was one of had quite a few tracks on the album, and this is him doing one. And this is it's a horse verse.
Written by my grandmother.
And written by his mother. Oops, there we go. Oh, come on.
Rauður þétt í reiðar glaum, ríkri mettur snillis keis á sprettum teygir taum, töltir létt á milli.
I've got 100 little snippets like that, making up a whole vinyl album. And it's later on the vinyl album. We've got the vinyl album, but later on, then they transferred it to a CD.
But they were not everybody happy about this way they did it. It was a woman called Margaret Hjalmarsdóttir. She was a kind of she's a good singer. She didn't like this idea. She wanted them to like sing more like a songs, you know, like a few verses. And so she actually dropped out of Iðunn and made her own album.
Yeah, and it's a really nice album too.
I think it's actually a much more nice album.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah, you know, feelings can run high in this area. It's like, now we're going to move forward a bit further. So into the 21st century. And we come to the 75th birthday of Iðunn, and they came up with this mega project, which was to get the recordings that had been made in the 1930s, the 200, off the silver discs, and re-release them. And it was a real labor of love, you could say. I remember it was shortly after Bára and I were first living together, and she got the job of proofreading the music notation of these recordings. And it was endlessly going over and over and over and saying, "Hey, Chris, what do you think he's doing in this bit here?" Because there's all these incredible decorations, and I don't know. It's just, I'm not the best on music kind of theory and all the rest of it. But anyway, the book was produced, and it is a real beauty. You can see here, it's quite a big one. It's got a lovely velvet cover, and there's the.
You have to show them the.
Oh yeah, you can see.
Here you see the name.
So it's called Silver Plötur Iðunnar. So the silver discs of Iðunn, and then inside you've got they're divided 50 each onto 4 CDs, mounting the cover, and then you get essays about the stuff and the music notation. You can see maybe like, so you get the words and the music notation, or at least the guide music notation, and then in the back there's a nice section where you get the biogs of all the performers and photographs of people and so on. So they got the names of all the performers and their birth and death dates and so on. And,
what are you doing?
I'm just trying to find the one with the pictures of the people. Hold on. I'm going to get there in a minute. Yeah. No, that's one of the essays. There we are. So here's all the biographies. You can see it's like little chapters, and where there were photographs available, we got photographs on as well. And so this was launched in a big concert in the City Theatre here in Reykjavik in 2004, which Bára and I were playing at. And but it's the important thing to note about this, and this is going back to the thing about Lagwater. These recordings, it's a bit like the 100 on a disc thing, but these recordings are recordings to show the Lagwater. So they're not recordings of complete songs. Each one is 4 verses, and the texts that they're using are like snippets out of Reamer. So like you might get verses 54 to 58 from a particular Reamer, and that's used for that particular melody and so on. Some of them are bits from shorter poems and so on. So these are not performances of songs.
So basically all this music you've been hearing is from these recordings.
Yeah, the earlier ones we were
Earlier
playing.
ones.
Okay, here we go.
Bjóð á kvöldi vetrarvöld, svifa tjald og snæðir ei saltur falda fjöld, fram á kaldum snæði.
Yeah, so basically you can see that in the top. Lagboði hljóð á kvöldi vetrarvöld, that's this tune.
Yeah.
And we used this tune for a CD also.
Yeah.
So I was singing verses by my father, poems by my father.
Yeah. And then you're going to do this one.
I was thinking of for you lagboði Þegar vetrar þokan grá. I like that tune. It's just only 3 tones. And it sounds like this. Þegar vetrar þokan grá, þig vill fjötra inni, svífðu burt og sestu hjá, sumar gleði þinni. Þar var löngum lokið skjótt lífsins öllum æðum, manstu hvað þær flýðu fljótt, fyrir hennar kvæðum. Taktu örugt hennar hönd, hún mun aftur finna þau hinn sælu sólskins lönd, sumar drauma þinna. Þar sem loftsins létti son, leið með skærum hljómi, þar sem yndi vor og von, vögguðu hverju blómi.
So you don't need a lot of notes to make a good tune. That's the lesson of that one, I think. Okay, so just wanted to let you know a bit about what we do these days, because we're both active members of the society. So through the year, we have monthly meetings from October to May, not this year, of course. And so there's the practice evening on the first Wednesday of the month, and then the Friday, 2 days after that, we have the main meeting. And then we have another thing called Söngvaka, which is where we're singing other kinds of folk songs, particularly the 2-part harmony songs that we've done before at Nordic Harp meeting, the Trisang. And then on the 15th of June every year, we go to this special place called Reamer, which is we haven't really got time to talk about it now, but there's a plot of forested land that was set up by the society as part of a bigger scheme that was initiated by the then president of Iceland, 30 years ago now? Quite a long time.
Yeah.
So it started off as little trees, now they're quite big trees. And so we go up there on the 15th of June for the evening and sit around and drink coffee and sing and so on. And then we have the day trip, which used to be the camping trip. The day trip is always at the beginning of September. And now we've got a new thing starting, which I'll come to in a minute, the Day of Reamer, which is on the 15th of September. So that's like the birthday of the organization. And then in February or thereabouts each year, we have an evening called Kvæðakvöld, which is a public event. And that's particularly with people singing kind of funny songs. And
so basically this concerts in the autumns, that's more, we are going kind of to the public more, like the concerts are downtown in a pub or. Yeah.
And there was a thing that, I mean, the society kind of, when I first started going to the society meetings, when I first started coming to Iceland, sort of going on 20 years ago, the membership was quite old. And in fact, a lot of them are no longer with us. So we've been working, particularly Bára, been working really hard to sort of reach out to a wider public and also to get another generation coming up into the organization and passing on what's there. So when a typical monthly meeting, we all sing, some people do solo bits, and then we also kveða together. People read poems that they've written, and we have talks about all kinds of topics. And then we have there's always a thing called what's it called? Bragfræði. One of our members, Ragnar Ingi, he's a world-class expert on the poetry stuff. So he gives talks about the stuff to do, the technical details of the poetry, I suppose you'd say. And then we have poets come and read and sell their books, and visiting musicians come and play. And then another feature of the evening is that people write verses during the evening. So when you come in, you sit at a table and everybody's got bits of paper and pencils, and they write verses through the evening, and they might write about something that's happening in the evening, or they might write about a hot topic in the news. So for sure, if there was a meeting last night, as there should have been, there would have been something about Trump in there for sure, and so on. And then they're all read out at the end of the night. So this writing verses in these styles is very much an ongoing part of what the organization does. So, as I said, last year, 2019, on the 15th of September, was the 90th birthday of the organization. And we had a whole weekend of celebrations. I've just seen a typo there as well. So we did a guided walk around the old part of Reykjavik and to look at places that were associated with the early members, including the building where the recording was made. And we decided to launch this idea of having an annual national day of Reamer, which would always be the 15th of September. We already have a national day of the Icelandic language in November, so we've added another national day. And then also another important part of that anniversary was that Bára and Ragnar Ingi, the poet I was mentioning, they made a new education package called Í geislam sólarlagsins, which is for use in schools. And Ragnar Ingi wrote a special new Reamer for kids with, how many was it? 4 or 5 Reamer?
For Reamer
with Mansinger.
Yeah, with 15 verses.
Yeah, so 60 verses.
Altogether.
Yeah. And so we're kind of going on and doing stuff. And now we come to another book that was published, which looks a lot like the other one. And this is another 160 recordings that were made in the 1960s. And it's the same format, same designer actually. And these are recordings made on tape, hence Seilband's title. And they were made in the 50s and 60s by society members, but not recording themselves, but going out and recording people around and about. And there's a couple of samples here.
Fljótt á þrotum gaktur hljóttum garða hjá. Gömlum tóttar brotum. Lagst í eyði löngu litla heiðar kotið fyrr á leiðum hafa hér. Hugir þreið
Yeah, this book was published in 2018, and Rosa Þorsteinsdóttir, who was here with us, she was the editor of that book, and she did a hell of a job.
Yeah,
finding out all kinds of information.
Yeah. And
about the people, singers and writers.
And one of the things that happened with this book that wasn't in the other one is that Steindor Anderson, who's a former chairperson of the organization, he did a load of research finding the poems that verses were from. So in the book, you get complete texts, even though the recording may be just of one verse.
Yeah, this time they recorded usually only one verse, and the singers repeated it, or sometimes they were 2 verses, so it's a shorter version of each song.
Yeah.
Mætu mundi mér hjá höld, marga stundu inni, man ég fundi og kvæða kvöld, kærust lundu minni. Heill og gæði hér á jörð, hljóttu í næði glaður, stattum fræði stuðla vörð, Stefán kvæðamaður.
And sometimes we could find longer recordings of the same songs with the same singers. So then we added to that.
Yeah. Okay, so
to the publication.
Okay, so we come to our last slide. So the society has built up quite an archive of stuff over the years, as you can imagine. And I don't think you really need me to tell you from what you've already been hearing that there's this huge resource that people can use for doing creative projects now, but also a huge resource for doing research about the whole business of Reamer and Kvæðalag and the oral tradition of music in Iceland. And here's some recordings. It's an example because in 2018, we were contacted by the guys from the Swedish band Grupa, who some of you are no doubt familiar with, Mats Eden and Jonas Simonsson, and they are working on a series of albums called Kind of Folk, and they done volumes 1 and 2 for Sweden and Norway, and they wanted to make Iceland volume 3. And so they came over and they met with us and also with Rosa, and we fed them a load of material, and particularly Sailband, and they went away and they made a whole album.
They bought the book from us.
They bought the book and they went away and made a whole album, and every single song on the album, except for one, and it's all made as instrumental music, apart from 2 or 3 tracks where Bára sings, 2 tracks that Bára sings. It's instrumental music made out of these recordings. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples.
Kallaði hátt svo heyrði hinn, land fyrir auga brá hann. Kvandáttur með klárinn minn, Steinn Jónsson á hann.
So there's the original, and then they did this with it. See what they did with that one, and now there's another one. And now we come back to Þuríður, who we were listening to earlier, and at the very beginning. So here we go.
Þessi langi veturvot vekur danga þínu, þannig langar ljúfa vot, liggja í vangi þínu.
I actually heard my father often sing this tune, so I kind of grew up with it, and I heard that before I heard this recording.
Yeah, and you keep coming back to it as well.
So this is the last.
This is the last music for the session. So we're just about run out of time. We don't overstay our welcome. So there you have it. So if you want to follow what we do, you can see the Facebook page, and the website is in the process of being rebuilt. So it's actually, you can hear all of the Lagboiler recordings on there, and notated by their various poetic meters. But there's a kind of gaps where other stuff should be at the moment. But there you have it. So it's nice to see you all again, and we look forward to meeting you next year in October.
Thank you.
Thank you.